At the beginning of the movie, we see a newly married couple whose wife's name was Julia. She had shifted to her country with her husband. Julia was American, so she did not understand the language here. Julia's husband brings her to his rented house. When Julia starts going inside, she notices that a man is watching her from the flat in front of the building, but she does not take this matter seriously and came to her house with her husband. The house that Julia's husband had rented had very big glass windows. At midnight, when she stands on her window, she notices that a man was still watching Julia from the flat in front of the building, but she still does not take it seriously. In the morning, when Julia's husband goes to his job, now Julia goes out for a walk. This country, the people living here, everything was very different for her. She did not know the language here, and neither did she understand anyone properly. Now when Julia comes back home, the door of her house was open. Seeing this, she was a little scared. Then the owner of the building comes out of her house, who was getting something fixed for the electrician. Julia comes inside her house. As time passed, the weather had also changed. Fast winters had also started. One night when Julia was waiting for her husband, she goes to the window while walking. She sees the man who used to look at her window all the time. He was still standing there and watching her. She finds this very strange. She was scared of this thing in her heart and mind. After a while, her husband also came home. She now goes out for a walk with him. They both see that the ambulance is standing near the building nearby. When they go and ask people, no one tells anything that what happened there. Julia comes home and hears the news on TV that there is a man in the building nearby who is a very dangerous killer. He killed the girl very mercilessly. Hearing this, Julia was very scared. She now tells her husband that there is a man in the building opposite who is always standing at his window and watching me. When her husband looks at his window, there was no one there. He tells Julia that this is just your illusion. There is nothing like that. The next day, her friend comes from Julia's husband's office. He was also talking about the same incident, the incident that happened near their house. He tells that man has killed many girls. Julia was more scared to hear his words because all those incidents were happening. Julia goes out to throw the garbage. She meets a girl on the way whose name was Irina. She used to stay with her house. She says that if you ever hear any sound from my house, then you have to bang something on the wall. Saying this, she left from there. Julia goes out where a boy was following her, but he goes a little ahead. Julia felt that he was following her, but this was just her illusion. She goes to watch a movie to cheer herself up, where there were only 4 people. Then she feels that someone has come and sat on the seat behind her, but she did not have the courage to look back, so she comes out of the theater without seeing. After this, she goes to the supermarket to buy her household goods. Here, too, she feels that the man who was sitting behind her in the theater, he is still following her. She quickly locks herself in the staff room here and starts looking at her from the glass. That man was also looking for her around. Quickly leaving the back door, Julia had come to her house. While eating dinner at night, she tells this whole incident to her husband. She says that the man who looks at me from the window, he was following me today. Hearing this, her husband takes her to the supermarket, where they check the recording of the camera, seeing which it is not known whether he was following Julia or not. Her husband tells her to see. You were looking at him, that's why he was looking at you. All this is just an illusion. But still, Julia takes the picture of that man in her phone. The next night when Julia was waiting for her husband, then she gets a call from her husband. He tells that he will not come home tonight. He has some important meeting. Julia is alone, scared. She covers the window, because she was still scared. The man who always looks at her, he must still be looking at her. She always felt that someone was around her. That's why someone knocks on the door. Julia opens the door in fear. There was an old woman outside who was asking Julia about her cat in her own language, and she does not understand anything. Then Irina, who was standing outside, who was looking at her, she says that this woman is asking about her cat, and she also tells Julia to come to her house. Now she did not have any friend, that's why she comes to Irina's house. While drinking, when they were talking to each other, then someone knocks on Irina's door loudly. She does not go and open the door. Standing there, she starts talking to someone. She does not understand whom Irina is talking to. She comes and tells that he was my friend, who was very angry. That's why I did not open the door. He has also given me a gun to save me. It's good, but sometimes he gets angry. After a while, Julia came back to her house. When she comes and removes the curtain from the window, still that man was standing there and looking at her. Julia now shakes his hand. He also shakes his hand in return. She was very scared about this now. When her husband comes home, she tells him everything. He was the same man who was following her in the market. But still, her husband does not doubt that man. He still makes Julia understand this and makes her quiet that this is just her illusion. That's why her husband now calls the police. Hearing all this, the police tells her that, "Madam, this can only be your illusion and nothing like that." Julia's husband says that you are tired. She feels very bad after hearing this from her husband that he does not believe her. The next morning, when Julia goes out for some work, she sees the same man who was looking at her from the window. He was going somewhere. She now follows him. She followed him to a bar where Irina also worked. Julia finds out about that man and finds out that he works as a cleaner in this bar. When she asks Irina about that man, she says that no, I don't know anything about him. Julia had now returned home. Sometimes she feels that someone has covered her face. Someone wants to kill her. But it was nothing like that. It was just a dream of Julia. She was so scared that she now had such thoughts and illusions. Then she hears voices from Irina's house, when she quickly goes to the owner of the building and tells her to open Irina's door, because she felt that she was in trouble. When the owner of the building opens her door, there was only a cat inside who had dropped the lamp, and Julia had also heard the sound of this lamp. The owner of that building also felt that Julia's behavior was very strange. When Julia's husband returns, the owner of the building tells her that your wife does very strange things. Julia explains a lot to her husband that whatever is happening around her is not her illusion, but a reality. But her husband tells her to stop it. Why are you doing this? He was now worried about this. There, Julia was very worried about Irina because she had not come home since last night. That's when she hears a voice from her door that was Irina's friend. Julia comes out and asks her, but she did not come to meet me, and I have come to her house to find out about this. Now no one is opening the door. She takes Irina's number from her and calls her, but her phone was in her house. When Irina's friend starts going from there, Julia stops him and says that I need your help. She took him to the building in front where the same man used to live, who used to look at Julia from the window. Irina's friend tells her to open the door, but no one opens the door, so he left from there. Now Julia knocks on the door. Then an old man opens the door, but he was not the man who always looked at Julia. The man who used to look at Julia from the window, who also followed her, came to Julia's house with the police and says that this girl troubles my dad. That old man was her dad. The policeman says that maybe you are mistaken. You should sit and solve this matter. He tells them to shake hands, but Julia was still scared of that man. After she left, her husband shows her the picture of the killer who was caught by the police and says that he killed the girl in the building nearby. He tells Julia that you don't need to be scared, but Julia was still scared. She doesn't say anything to her husband because he doesn't believe her. Julia's husband takes her to a party where everyone was talking about that killer who had been caught. Here, Julia's husband tells everyone that yes, my wife is also afraid of such a killer who has no identity. He was making a kind of joke of Julia. After that, Julia feels very bad. She left the party and came home. She comes home and starts packing her clothes. She wanted to leave this country and go back to her country because she was tired here. Then she hears the music from Irina's house, and now she goes inside her house. There was Irina's dead body there. Before she could tell anyone, someone attacks her who was no one else but the same man whom Julia was scared of. Her suspicion was absolutely right. The next victim was regains consciousness. She sees the same man in front of her who had a knife in his hand. That man tells her that your suspicion was right. When you came to Irina's house, I killed her and hid myself and her dead body. Saying this, he attacks Julia with a knife. Then Julia hears her husband's voice. When Julia's husband comes home, he sees that Julia was not at home. When he calls her, her voice was coming from Irina's house. When he comes out of the house, he sees the same man coming out of Irina's house, seeing whom he was suspicious that he must have killed his wife, too. Now that man was heading towards Julia's husband. Then someone shoots from Irina's house, and at the same time that man died. Actually, Julia had killed him with Irina's gun, which she used to keep with her for protection.
She was dead,
Julia pretended she was alive. She was breathing. Then Julia comes out of Irina's house, which was full of phone, and looks at her husband, thinking that he was making fun of her fear. In this way, Julia killed the real murderer. That is, the same man on whom Julia was suspicious was killing all the girls. So take care of everything around you. Do a good investigation of anything. Never make fun of the fear of others. Otherwise, this incident can happen to you too, because you do not know the intentions of the people around you. And with this message, this film story ends here. Thanks.